Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, issued an official military statement on Monday, March 2nd, 2026. Not a rumor, not a social media post, an official, signed, distributed military communique. And word for word, this is what it said. The office of the criminal prime minister of the Zionist regime and the headquarters of the regime's Air Force commander were targeted. And then the sentence that should be on the front page of every newspaper on earth right now. They added this: the fate of the Israeli prime minister is unknown. Read that again. Iran's military, a nuclear threshold state in the middle of an active war, just declared in an official statement that it had targeted the office of a sitting head of government with ballistic missiles, and then said publicly that it does not know whether he survived. Israel's response? Official silence on the strike itself. Zero confirmation. Zero denial of the hit. Zero statement addressing what happened inside that building. I want to break this down properly, because what happened on March 2nd is not just a military event, it is a signal, it is a message. And the silence coming out of Jerusalem right now may be more strategically significant than anything Iran actually launched. Here is what is at stake right now, today, in real time. Iran has launched 10 separate waves of ballistic missiles and drones at Israel since February 28th. 10. Not one retaliation, not a symbolic response. 10 coordinated, sequenced, escalating waves of strikes under an operation they have formally named True Promise 4. Wave 1 targeted military infrastructure. Wave 10 targeted the prime minister. That is not escalation. That is a pre-planned, deliberate, sequenced campaign working toward a singular objective. And the man at the center of it, and the man whose fate Iran just declared publicly unknown, has gone silent on that specific question. Not metaphorically silent, not diplomatically quiet, operationally silent. The Israeli government has issued no statement confirming or denying that missiles impacted the prime minister's office compound in Tel Aviv. Think about what that silence means in the middle of an active war. Think about what it tells Iran. Think about what it tells every ally watching. The world is asking one question right now, and the answer has not come. Let me be precise about what we know and what we do not know, because precision matters more than narrative in a situation this consequential. What we know, confirmed by named sources, Iran's IRGC confirmed via its official communique reported by AFP and Xinhua on March 2nd, 2026, that during the 10th wave of Operation True Promise 4, it deployed K-bar ballistic missiles specifically targeting Benjamin Netanyahu's office in Tel Aviv and the command headquarters of Israel's Air Force commander. The IRGC stated that the locations were, quote, severely hit. That is their word. Severely. We know, confirmed by the Israeli Defense Force's own statement, that new missiles were launched from Iran on March the 2nd and that Israeli defensive systems were actively engaged. The IDF said, and I quote, defensive systems are operating to intercept the threat. They confirmed the launch. They did not confirm what was intercepted and what was not. We know that Benjamin Netanyahu appeared in public hours after the IRGC claim, not at his office, not at a government briefing, but at the site of an Iranian missile strike in Beit Shemesh, a city approximately 30 kilometers from Tel Aviv, where 9 Israeli civilians had just been killed. He was photographed and filmed there. He spoke to cameras there. He did not address the claim about his office. We know that the IRGC stated in the same official communique that Netanyahu's fate was, quote, unknown, and promised further details would be provided later. As of this recording, those details have not been provided. What we do not know whether any K-bar missile penetrated the Israeli air defense envelope and impacted the prime minister's office complex. Israel has not confirmed it. Iran has not provided post-strike imagery. And we do not know, and this is the question that changes every strategic calculation in this conflict, whether the silence from Jerusalem is a managed information operation, a sign of genuine structural damage, or something in between. Netanyahu's fate is unknown. That is what Iran said, and Israel has not answered it. To understand how we arrived at March the 2nd and that IRGC statement, You need to understand what happened in the 10 days before the bombs fell. Because the mainstream media is covering the war. Almost nobody is covering what came immediately before it. For weeks leading up to February 28th, nuclear negotiations were underway in Geneva between American and Iranian officials. Steve Witkoff, Trump's chief negotiator, was the American lead. There were public reports of progress. There were leaks suggesting a framework was emerging. The Iranians were engaged. Senior Iranian officials believed, based on everything they were hearing through diplomatic channels, that a deal was possible. It was not possible. It was never going to be possible. Chatham House, one of the most respected geopolitical research institutions in the world, has now confirmed that the negotiations in Geneva were, in their assessment, a deliberate smokescreen, a deception and psychological warfare operation designed to lull the Iranian leadership into a false sense of security before the strikes. And the confirmation comes not from an analyst's theory. It comes from Witkoff's own words. He told Fox News that Trump had wondered aloud why the Iranians didn't simply, his word, capitulate to U.S. demands. Capitulate. There was no room for compromise in that negotiating position. There never was. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was caught by surprise on February 28th because he believed diplomacy was still alive. It was not alive. It had been killed months earlier and left standing as a decoy. Now understand the timeline of what happened once the mask came off. February 28th, 2026, the United States and Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, joined by the American Operation Midnight Sun, a coordinated multi-domain strike campaign against Iranian military infrastructure, leadership compounds, and nuclear sites across Tehran, Qom, Tabriz, and Khorramshahr simultaneously. President Donald Trump announced the operations publicly, calling on the Iranian people to rise up against their government. In the first wave, Khamenei was killed. Gone. The man who had ruled Iran for 35 years, who had built the axis of resistance, who had personally overseen every major decision from Hezbollah's build-out to the nuclear program, dead within hours of the first strike. Alongside him, Defense Council Secretary Ali Shamkhani, IRGC Commander Major General Mohammad Pakpour, Defense Minister Brigadier General Aziz Nasirzadeh, the Iranian intelligence chief, the entire top tier of Iran's strategic command decapitated in a single operational window. Iran did not collapse. Iran responded. The Khaybar-Sheikhan is a medium-range ballistic missile with a reported range of 2,400 kilometers and a precision guidance package that Iran claims can hit targets within meters. The Khaybar missile, what the IRGC used in the 10th wave against Netanyahu's office, is not a terror weapon. It is a precision strike instrument. Iran deploying K-bars against a name-specific building means Iran is not firing blindly. It means Iran identified a target, assigned a specific missile type to it, and executed. Within 72 hours of the initial American-Israeli strike, Iran had launched 10 separate waves at Israel, struck 14 U.S. military bases across the region, in Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, and opened a second front through Hezbollah in Lebanon. An Iranian drone struck Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan exclave on March 5th, pulling a NATO-adjacent state into the blast radius. A cargo ship caught fire in the Strait of Hormuz on March 11th. That is where we were. Here is where we are now. Now understand what the IRGC statement on March 2nd actually means, not the surface reading, the strategic reading. Politically, the message Iran sent is this: we have abandoned the doctrine of plausible deniability. Every previous Iranian strike on Israeli or American targets in recent years came wrapped in layers of proxy distance. Hezbollah fires, the Houthis fire, IRGC-aligned militias fire, Iran maintains clean hands. That doctrine is now dead. Iran's IRGC is publicly, formally on the record, claiming a direct precision strike on the personal office of a sitting head of government. They are not hiding. They are announcing. That is not the language of a force that is afraid of escalation. That is the language of a force that has decided escalation is the only remaining option. Militarily, the Khaybar deployment tells you something critical about Iran's strategic posture after losing its top command. The conventional wisdom was that decapitating Iran's leadership would paralyze the military response, that without Khamenei, without Shamkhani, without Pakpur, the operational machinery would seize up, the command chain would fragment, and Iran's response would be disorganized and ineffective. That did not happen. 10 waves in 10 days. 14 U.S. bases struck. A ship on fire in the Strait of Hormuz. Whatever command disruption occurred at the top, the operational layer of the IRGC absorbed it and continued executing. That is not improvisation. That is a pre-planned, sequenced, deliberate operation that required no leadership authorization at each stage because the orders were already issued. Pay attention to this part. The phase structure of Operation True Promise 4 tells you exactly where Iran believes it is in this war. Phase 1. Restore deterrence by hitting military infrastructure. Done. Phase 2. Expand the conflict horizontally. Drag in Hezbollah. Strike Gulf state U.S. bases. Make the pain regional, not bilateral. Done. Phase 3. Decapitation in reverse. Hit the Israeli leadership. Answer Israeli strikes on Khamenei with Iranian strikes on Netanyahu. Phase 3 is what happened on March 2nd. And symbolically, this is the part that will reverberate for years. Iran has now put into the public record that it targeted a sitting Western-aligned head of government with a precision ballistic missile and declared his fate unknown. Every leader in the Middle East is watching. Every leader who has normalized with Israel is watching. Every American ally who hosts a U.S. base is watching. The signal is not subtle. The signal is nobody is above the reach of this escalation. Not the Prime Minister, not the alliance, not the base on your soil. And now look at the fracture, not the Israel-Iran fracture. That is the story everyone is covering. Look at the Gulf specifically, because the implications there extend far beyond anything happening over Tel Aviv right now. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait are trapped. Each of those countries hosts American military infrastructure. Each of those countries is now under Iranian missile and drone attack, not as collateral damage, not by accident, but deliberately, because Iran's stated doctrine in this war is that any country hosting U.S. forces that participates in or enables strikes on Iranian territory is a legitimate military target. These are countries that spent the better part of the last decade trying to engineer exactly this outcome. They wanted Iran contained. They wanted American firepower pointed at Tehran. And now that it is pointed at Tehran, the guns are also pointing back at them, and their populations are living under air raid alerts. Their airports are disrupted, their energy infrastructure is under threat, and their sovereign wealth funds are watching oil markets do things that threaten the very economic model their countries depend on. Saudi Arabia is trapped between a security relationship it cannot exit and a threat it cannot absorb. The UAE is trapped between it cannot exit and a threat it cannot absorb. Qatar, which hosts Al Udeid Air Base, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, is trapped between a security relationship it cannot exit and a threat it cannot absorb. They each made the same bet, and the bet is now being collected. Meanwhile, look at the U.S.-Israel alliance itself, because Chatham House's analysis identifies something that Washington is not publicly discussing. If this war goes wrong, if it drags on, if Iranian retaliation expands, if oil stays above $100, if the Republicans lose the midterm elections because of it, the blame will land directly on Israel's doorstep. There is growing skepticism inside the Democratic Party about the depth of the American commitment to Israel's strategic objectives. Trump's support for Netanyahu is absolute today. It may not be absolute in 6 months. And Netanyahu, who launched this war in part to secure his own political survival in an Israeli election year, has bet his future on that support lasting. That is not a safe bet. That is the biggest gamble in modern Israeli political history. Before we go any further, stop at the Strait of Hormuz, because the Strait of Hormuz is not just a geographic feature on a map. It is the single most important choke point in the global energy economy, and it is currently on fire. 1/5 of all global petroleum liquids pass through the Strait of Hormuz. More than 1/4 of all seaborne oil trade on Earth transits that 33-kilometer-wide channel. Iran's missiles, Iran's naval assets, Iranian aligned forces, and Iranian drones are now actively operating in and around it. A cargo ship caught fire there on March 11th. Traffic through the strait has effectively stalled. Oil crossed $114 a barrel in the days following February 28th. $114. That is not a number on a trading screen. That is your gas prices. That is your heating bill. That is the cost of every product that moves inside a container: food, medicine, electronics, clothing. When oil moves to $114 during an active conflict that shows no sign of resolution, analysts are not talking about a price spike. They are talking about a structural shock. Economists are now projecting global inflation acceleration and recession risk if the Strait of Hormuz remains disrupted for more than 30 days. We are already past 10 days. Amazon Web Services data centers in the UAE were struck by Iranian drones, causing regional internet infrastructure outages. International airspace across the Middle East is closed or severely restricted. Airlines are rerouting. Shipping companies are either rerouting around Africa, adding 2 weeks to transit times, or not sailing at all. The Strait of Hormuz has never been fully closed in modern history. We are watching the closest thing to that scenario that the 21st century has yet produced. But here is what is not being covered. Here is the real story underneath the one everyone is watching. The question the media keeps asking is, why did Iran get caught by surprise? How did the supreme leader of a sovereign state, with his own intelligence apparatus, with his own network of regional proxies, with decades of experience evading American and Israeli operations, how did he not see February 28th coming? The answer is Geneva. For weeks before the strikes, Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's chief negotiator, was sitting across the table from Iranian officials in Geneva in what appeared to the world, and critically appeared to the Iranians, to be serious nuclear negotiations. There were reports of progress. There were leaks suggesting a framework. Senior Iranian figures were publicly signaling engagement. The Islamic Republic was, for the first time in years, allowing itself to believe that the Americans wanted a deal. They did not want a deal. Witkoff himself told Fox News, and pay attention to this because it is the most revealing sentence any American official has spoken about this entire episode, that Trump had wondered aloud why the Iranians didn't simply capitulate to U.S. demands. Capitulate. That word tells you everything about what was happening in that negotiating room. There was no negotiation. There was one side presenting demands and expressing bewilderment that the other side had not already surrendered. That is not diplomacy. That is theater performed for a specific strategic purpose. The purpose was to keep Iran's leadership at the table, psychologically committed to the possibility of a deal, complacent, not on war footing, right up until the moment the planes launched. It worked. Khamenei was caught by surprise. His entire inner circle was caught by surprise. The decapitation strike succeeded in its first wave precisely because the targets were not prepared for an attack on that specific night. The Geneva negotiations were not diplomacy. They were the final act of a deception operation. And the most consequential consequence of that deception is this: Iran knows now that American diplomatic overtures cannot be trusted as genuine. For a generation, any future American negotiator who sits across from any Iranian counterpart will be doing so with that knowledge in the room. The off-ramp that diplomacy represents, the possibility that words on paper could stop missiles in the air, that off-ramp has been systematically and deliberately destroyed, not as a side effect, as the objective. Netanyahu's fate is unknown. That sentence, issued by a sovereign military force, delivered in an official communiqué, distributed to global media, has been sitting in the public record since March 2nd, 2026. Israel has not confirmed that all missiles were intercepted. Israel has not shown us the Prime Minister's office building standing undamaged. Israel showed us Netanyahu standing at a missile strike site in Beit Shemesh, 9 kilometers away from his office, speaking about Iranian terror. He has not addressed what happened inside that compound. Netanyahu's fate is unknown. And the deeper question, the one that outlasts any single missile, any single strike, any single wave of a 10-wave campaign, is what happens to this war when there is no supreme leader left in Tehran to call it off, no meaningful diplomacy left to provide an exit, and a U.S. president who declared victory on March 9th, even as his bombers were preparing for another intense day of strikes on March 10th. The world is waiting for an answer, not just about Netanyahu, about all of it, about what the end state looks like, about what victory means when the enemy has been decapitated and is still firing, about what diplomacy means after Geneva. And until those answers come, every strike, every wave, every missile that clears the Strait of Hormuz or doesn't, every one of them happens inside a strategic vacuum that may be more dangerous than all the K-bar missiles Iran has left to fire. Netanyahu's fate is unknown. So is the outcome of this war, and the world is waiting. I will be back the moment something breaks. Share this if it gave you value. This story deserves far more attention than it is getting. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. See you in the next one.